She showed up to a military celebration wearing a faded cardigan and holding a strange invitation. 30 minutes later, the ship went silent and every sailor stood at full salute. No one knew her name. Not yet. 1 minute, she was being removed from the USS Truman for violating protocol. The next, high-ranking officers were scrambling to make things right. Harper Mitchell hadn't set foot near a naval vessel in 3 years. The last time she stood this close to the USS Truman, she was giving orders. Now, clutching an anonymous invitation, she told herself, I don't belong here anymore. But she came anyway. The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval yard as Harper approached the gates of USS Truman. The elegant invitation bearing the official naval seal simply requested her presence at the ship's anniversary celebration. There was no return address, no explanation, just a summons pulling her back into a world she had deliberately left behind. She looked entirely out of place among the well-dressed guests, her worn gray cardigan and simple jeans stark against their designer outfits. What no one could see was the small, worn metal box she gripped tightly in her old leather purse or the almost imperceptible military bearing years of civilian life hadn't erased. At the security checkpoint stood Blake Morrison, the 32-year-old son of Norfolk's deputy mayor and head of security for the event. His Hugo Boss suit and slicked-back hair reflected his self-satisfaction and inflated sense of importance. Blake, accustomed to deference, reveled in maintaining standards, which often meant making sure those outside high society understood their place. Spotting Harper, his lips curled into a smirk. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your invitation," Blake announced with theatrical authority. Harper quietly handed over the card. Blake barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "I'm afraid your name isn't on our VIP list, which means this invitation might be questionable. You'll need to wait in our special verification area." He gestured dismissively toward a roped-off section, clearly enjoying his public display of authority. Harper nodded without complaint and moved toward the designated area. As she passed the welcome table, something caught her eye, a detailed scale model of the USS Truman. Her fingers moved before she could stop them, just like during pre-deployment inspections. She immediately saw the model was oriented incorrectly, the radar array pointing southwest when it should face northeast to avoid coastal interference. Without thinking, she stepped forward and gently adjusted it with practiced precision. The radar needs to face northeast at 15 degrees to avoid signal interference from the Norfolk Communications Tower, she murmured. Several nearby guests turned to stare, their conversations faltering. Blake, watching Harper like a cat, seized the moment. "Oh, wonderful. So now we have a naval engineering expert," he announced, his voice dripping with mockery. The crowd's attention focused on Harper, who looked up at Blake with piercing blue eyes. "I've walked these decks during times when no one else dared to step foot aboard," she replied, her voice steady as steel. The words hung with an odd weight that should have warned Blake, but his ego was too inflated. A wealthy guest dismissed her. Everyone thinks they're an expert on everything they see on television these days. Blake nodded, letting silence humiliate her. As Harper gripped the metal box in her purse tighter, something flickered behind her eyes. A fleeting glimpse of steely resolve that should have been a final warning. Blake had no idea the woman he publicly mocked had once commanded the very ship they stood beside, leading it through dangerous missions that saved countless lives and earned her the highest recognition. Blake Morrison saw his moment for social media fame. He stepped forward, phone recording, positioning himself to capture Harper and the distinguished guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what deceit looks like, draped in sympathy," he announced, his voice confident. Comments flooded his live stream. Disrespecting military protocol, taking advantage of veterans. Blake fed off this digital validation. This person has been making completely false claims about naval knowledge and attempting to access restricted memorial areas reserved for the families of genuine heroes, he declared. Officer Davis, a 35-year-old security officer with 15 years of active military service, approached with restraints at his belt. He'd arrested genuine threats before, but something about Harper didn't fit. She didn't look like someone trying to cause trouble or infiltrate secure areas for malicious purposes. She looked like someone who belonged. When Davis reached for her wrists, she didn't resist. Instead, she extended her hands with calm compliance. She looked directly at Blake, an expression that made Davis's blood run cold. It wasn't the look of a victim, but the glacial stare of someone who had once decided the fates of others. "Are you absolutely certain you want to do this?" Harper asked Blake, her voice steady and controlled. Blake, intoxicated by his own righteousness, interpreted her composure as arrogance. The restraint secured with a sound that echoed. Harper never broke eye contact with Blake, never showed fear. As Officer Davis led her away, Harper spoke just loud enough for him to hear. He has no idea what he just did to himself. The video was already spreading like wildfire. Admiral Thompson, commander of the USS Truman for 8 years, dropped his mug. He had never forgotten the 4 transformative years Harper Mitchell served as his second in command. Watching her led away in restraints while Blake Morrison live-streamed was like watching someone burn the American flag. A rage built inside him. He remembered the 2019 fire drill when she rerouted the entire crew through smoke-filled corridors in under 4 minutes, saving 73 lives. Thompson stormed through the ship, his dress shoes creating a rhythm against the metal decking that spoke of fury and desperate urgency. "Morrison." Thompson's voice cut across the deck like a whip. Blake looked up, surprised, then confused. "Admiral, sir, I've successfully handled a serious security breach," Blake reported proudly, phone raised. "I caught someone attempting to infiltrate the memorial area with fake credentials. The video already has over 50,000 views." Thompson's expression darkened. "What exactly did you do to that woman?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a register that made nearby crew members instinctively step back. Blake's confidence wavered, but his ego wouldn't allow him to consider an error. The woman made obviously false claims about having naval knowledge and tried to access restricted memorial areas without proper authorization. "I exposed her as a fraud and had her detained for criminal trespassing." Thompson closed his eyes briefly, as if in physical pain. "Take me to her immediately," he ordered, his voice now deadly quiet, "and pray to whatever God you believe in that we can somehow fix what you've done." They descended to the ship's holding area in silence. Harper sat calmly behind the metal bars, still gripping the small metal box. When Thompson entered, his entire demeanor shifted from command authority to almost religious reverence. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something that I already know the answer to," Thompson said, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you still carry?" She nodded once. Harper slowly withdrew the worn metal box from her purse. When Thompson saw the familiar container, he staggered, then immediately came to attention and rendered the most precise military salute Blake had ever witnessed. A guest near Blake dropped his champagne glass. "Wait, she was XO?" another whispered. No one was filming anymore, just watching. The Admiral's hands were shaking. "Commander Mitchell, I apologize more deeply than words can ever express for what has happened here today under my command," Thompson said, his voice breaking. Blake watched bewildered. The assembly whistle echoed across USS Truman. Hundreds of crew members and distinguished guests gathered on the main deck. Harper Mitchell walked onto the deck, escorted by a full honor guard. Her bearing was completely transformed. She moved with the unmistakable posture of command. Blake Morrison stood frozen, his phone still recording, his confidence evaporated. Admiral Thompson approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and crew members of USS Truman," Thompson began, "I want to introduce you to former Lieutenant Commander Harper Mitchell, who served as commanding officer aboard this very vessel from 2018 to 2022. Gasps of shock and murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Thompson continued, "In 15 missions in hostile waters, on one of them she dragged a wounded crewman across a burning deck barehanded. The crowd listened in stunned silence, their faces reflecting shame, awe, and understanding of the injustice. The impact was nowhere more devastating than on Blake. His viral video was being viewed by millions who now learned he had publicly humiliated not just an innocent woman, but a genuine American hero. Comments on his live stream shifted dramatically from support to outrage. "Oh my God, she's a real war hero. That security guy just destroyed his own life. She saved 73 people and he treated her like garbage." One VIP muttered, "We applauded the wrong man." Admiral Thompson carefully opened the worn metal box Harper had protected, revealing a gleaming Navy Cross. "This is the Navy Cross, awarded for extraordinary heroism in the face of mortal danger," Thompson explained. Commander Mitchell didn't seek recognition for her service. She simply served with distinction and then quietly returned to civilian life to care for her dying mother. The entire crew rendered simultaneous salutes that lasted for a full minute of absolute silence. She didn't bask in it, she breathed through it. Blake desperately tried to approach her, but Harper didn't acknowledge him. Facing the sailors, she said, "I didn't leave the Navy because I was weak, unqualified, or unable to handle the demands of military service. Not all heroes fight wars. Some just hold their mother's hand until the very end. When people think you're no one, they speak freely around you. That's how I heard how little they expected of me." That silence, that dismissal, is a weight heavier than a uniform. The crowd erupted in sustained applause. Blake's live stream had now been viewed by over 2 million people, making him the most hated man in America. Blake's personal and professional world collapsed. His employer terminated his contract. His social media accounts were flooded with angry messages. He kept replaying her question, "Are you sure you want to do this?" It hadn't sounded like fear, but a final door closing. His father, a decorated colonel, didn't call, his silence deafening. Harper Mitchell, meanwhile, became an overnight sensation. When asked on a national TV program if she could forgive Blake, she paused. "Forgiveness isn't about letting people off the hook," Harper said, looking directly into the camera. "It's about releasing yourself from the weight of hate. I don't forgive to help him. I forgive so I can keep helping others. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened. And it doesn't mean pretending that actions don't have consequences." Blake's father called him for what would be their last conversation for a long time. "You have disgraced everything our family stands for." Immediately after Harper's interview, Blake wrote a handwritten letter to her. "I failed you. I see that now. I'll spend my life proving I understand what that failure cost. Not just you, but everyone watching." One day, volunteering at a community center, he almost said he had a story to tell, but then stayed quiet. He tore up the copy of the letter he had sent Harper. He didn't need evidence he had once known he was wrong. 12 months after the incident, Harper Mitchell had become a symbol of dignity. She used her platform to help others, establishing a foundation to help veterans transition to civilian careers. She continued working at the Norfolk Public Library. She transformed a section of the library into a specialized resource center for former service members. Blake Morrison, having lost his security position, took a job at a small nonprofit, accepting a salary less than a quarter of his previous earnings. The work was humbling, teaching him about genuine service. Unbeknownst to him, the nonprofit received significant funding from Harper's foundation. One quiet afternoon at the library, Harper noticed a familiar figure posting job announcements, the woman who had sneered at her old cardigan, now a volunteer. Harper walked past, offering a small nod. Some transformations didn't need recognition. The moment Blake had both dreaded and hoped for finally arrived when Harper visited the Veterans Center. They found themselves face to face. Blake, without excuses, simply said, "I understand that I don't deserve your forgiveness yet, but I want you to know that I'm trying to become someone who might earn it someday." Harper studied his face. "I'm not forgiving you to make you feel better," she said quietly. "I'm doing it so I can move forward. But that doesn't erase what happened. True redemption isn't about feeling better about what you did. It's about making sure it never happens again to anyone ever." 6 months later, Harper made a surprise appearance at the Veterans Center's annual fundraising dinner where Blake was being quietly recognized. She paused beside a modest plaque, "Volunteer of the Year, Blake Morrison." She didn't smile, but she stayed an extra second. In her remarks, she spoke about second chances. "We all have the capacity for both great harm and great good. What matters is not whether we make mistakes, but whether we learn from them and use that knowledge to serve others." The story of Harper Mitchell and Blake Morrison became a case study. Harper's foundation flourished, helping thousands. Blake continued his quiet work in community service, demonstrating through his actions the values he had failed to show. USS Truman established a reading room in Harper's honor where her Navy Cross was displayed with 7 engraved words, "Leadership is silent when it needs to be." The footage that had threatened to destroy Harper's dignity and Blake's reputation ultimately became a testament to the possibility of redemption and the transformative power of grace. Their story proved that sometimes the most ordinary-looking people carry the most extraordinary stories and that everyone deserves to be treated with respect. Most importantly, it demonstrated that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, and true strength lies not in destroying enemies, but in helping them become better.